Presentation, Jessica Simmons is going to give a presentation on the draft land management plan, and it'll be about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. And we do have a few people on Teams, if you want people to introduce themselves, or, maybe we can go around here and introduce ourselves in the Fort Tuthill Mess Hall, and then we can introduce ourselves on Teams. Cynthia, would you like to start?
You bet. Cynthia Nemeth, I'm with Coconino County Parks and Recreation.
Steve Strickland, venue manager, Pepsi Amphitheater, by way of our entertainment.
Carlton Lane with Luke Air Force Base, Fort Tuthill.
Chloe Donaldson, Coconino County Parks and Recreation.
And this is Liz Krug with Coconino County Parks and Recreation. And in Teams, Paul Dawson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Paul Dawson here. I work for the Coconino National Forest in the Flagstaff Ranger District, and I'm one of the assistant recreation staff officers.
Well, thank you. Jonathan Allen?
Hi everyone. Yeah, Jonathan Allen, Flagstaff Snow Park, operate the snow play area at Fort Tuthill.
Oh, thank you. Rob Morrison?
Howdy, Rob Morrison, operations and maintenance manager, Coconino County Parks and Rec.
Thanks, Rob. Armando Ruiz?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Armando Ruiz. I wear many hats, but I'm representing Flagstaff Archers in this meeting.
Thanks so much, Armando. And I see we have somebody named Steven as a guest.
Yes, my name's Stephen Patterson. I'm the Regional Operations Director for Vista Recreation.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I think that's it.
Great, and I'm Jessica Simmons. I'm with Coconino County Parks and Rec. I'm going to be giving this talk today. Can you folks on the computer, on the phone, hear me okay?
I'm getting thumbs up.
Oh, great, thanks. Can't see those on mine. Well, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining today, whether in person or virtually. I'm going to be giving you guys an overview of the Fort Tuthill County Park Management Plan. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about what a management plan is. We already have a master plan for Fort Tuthill. That's kind of the 10,000-foot view that gives an overview of what we want the park to be, how we want it to serve the region. And the management plan, that's going to get more into the nitty-gritty, exactly how we're going to manage different aspects of the park. So that's what we're looking at today. And the reason we want to do this is because Fort Tuthill is facing a lot of different changes. One change is that we've acquired about 220 acres in the northwest corner of the park, which we've incorporated into Tuthill, and we have that under a conservation easement. So we want to make sure we can conserve that, which we'll get into a little bit. And another reason is that to the north and northeast, we have land owned by Northern Arizona Healthcare, and they are in the process of, they want to put in a really extensive healthcare campus right there. So that's going to be directly adjacent to the park. So we just want to make this plan so that we can solidify and codify what we want to do with the park and how we're going to manage things on the park and what our goals are. So far, we started this about 2 years ago, back in 2020. We've written a draft of the plan that's internally with Coconino Parks and Rec and also with input from the Parks and Rec Commission. Then over the summer, we presented the draft plan to the Parks and Rec Commission and to the Board of Supervisors. We got comments from them and incorporated those. And right now, this week, this is the first of 2 open houses we're having. We have this one right now, and then we have another one Thursday evening. So we're going to get all those comments from the public and our stakeholders as well, and hopefully, probably early next year, 2023, we'll put it in front of the Board of Supervisors for approval. So that's where we're at right now. So any of you, we're hoping you're here so you can see what we're doing, and if you have any comments, we can take them just verbally to me or to any of us through the Conveyo website, which we'll describe, and then if you're here in person, we have pieces of paper too. So right now, I'm just going to go down the list of I'm going to just take you through the plan from beginning to end. And I apologize for the wall of text nature of these slides, but we really want to show you all the goals we have in this plan, which we've taken all this input from, and we discussed it extensively internally, and these are how we want the park to go. And so I'm just gonna show you all the goals we have for all the different sections. So first up, the first chapter is the introduction, and it has 5 chapters. Oh, I lost my table of contents. So the plan has 5 chapters. The first one is the introduction, basically describes the park and why we're doing this kind of plan. So chapter 2, this is the natural environment chapter, and I have here a list of the sections and subsections in this chapter just so you can see the topics we address. So we have a vegetation section that has forests, weed control, and pollinators. We have a wildlife section where we talk about general and special status wildlife. Then we talk about water, dark skies, and then scenic and aesthetic values, just how we want the park to look for visitors. So we'll dive in. We've got the forest section. Obviously, we talk about ponderosa pine forest. That's a big issue around here for forest health and fire control reasons, so we describe that. And then here are the goals we have for the forest, which is to introduce prescribed fire to the open spaces of Fort Tuthill. We want to promote wildlife benefits with trees by retaining edges, canopy openings, and heterogeneity, so there are different types of habitat within the park. We want to protect trees from damage due to event activity, construction, and soil compaction, so that comes into play when we have vendors, concessionaires, and different events on the park. We want to make sure they're not damaging natural resources. We want to manage the forest to favor a mixed age forest of ponderosa and oak and juniper, with hoping to keep as much old growth in as we can. We want to develop forest health educational opportunities through our partnership, and we want to monitor forest conditions to track the health of our forest. So in our weed control section, we describe the types of invasive weeds we had and how we deal with those. And our goals are to maintain or decrease areas that are currently infested. Sometimes once a weed is established, it's hard to completely eliminate it, but we want to at least prevent those areas from growing. And we want to continue chemical and physical control of diffuse snapweed, and if we notice any new infestations pop up, we want to aggressively jump on those before they can spread. And then the last goal is systemized weed monitoring and treatment every 2 years at other known infestation areas. So we'll keep track of those and make sure to visit them regularly. Next is the pollinator section, which I think is really cool to address. We're talking about insect pollinators. So we want to encourage habitat for pollinators here on Tuthill. So we kind of talk about that, and then the goals that address that are to develop a policy that prohibits park users from removing existing vegetation. We want to create a park rule and policy that provide guidance about mowing. So we obviously need to mow in some places because we're going to use those areas for parking or whatnot, and then also we sometimes need to mow for fire control. But we just want to minimize those. We don't really want, this park has a little more of a natural look, and we don't want to just mow for aesthetic reasons. So that's what that addresses. We want to manage open spaces of Tuthill for pollinator habitat by encouraging native plants. And we want to post a sign informing visitors about what we're doing for pollinators and why it's important and how we're addressing that. Okay, the next section is wildlife. So in the text, we talk a little bit about the wildlife we have on the park and their importance both within the park and to the larger ecosystem. And the goals are to provide habitat and ecological processes necessary for the life cycle of local species. And these are the ways we want to address that. By maintaining open space in the park in as natural a state as possible, which we've sort of addressed. By providing and retaining important habitat elements, such as snags, trees with defects, and cavities. These are important habitats for a lot of birds and smaller animals. And we are putting in a wildlife drinker too, so we're already working on that goal. We don't want to cut trees or remove vegetation during the nesting season unless they pose a danger, like an old rotten tree. That would be an exception to that. We're going to work with partners to enhance habitat values of the park, including brush piles, that's sort of already addressed too, limit manicured and mowed areas, which we mentioned, and exploring maybe additional ways to provide more water for wildlife, which is a big issue in this region. We want to provide guided and unguided opportunities for the public to watch wildlife. There's a group called Arizona Watchable Wildlife Experience that has 30 watchable wildlife sites within 30 miles of Flagstaff, and Tuthill is one of those. So from trails and the wildlife drinker and interpretive science, we want to encourage people to come and explore our natural open areas and experience that. And we want to retrofit existing fencing where it's feasible to make it more wildlife friendly. That means when animals try to cross it, they're able to, and it doesn't catch them up and trap them. Our next our next section is the water section. So in the text, we talk about watershed features. Fort Tuthill is right on the edge between the Little Colorado and the Oak Creek watershed, which is kind of interesting. And what we're doing as a department to save potable water and decrease surface water pollution. And the goals that are associated with water, we have to address slope and drainage patterns of parking lot improvements, continue to not use potable water for dust mitigation where we have dirt roads, to work with the city to access reclaimed water for working horse arenas. So that's trying to get where we can use the treated water here instead of just potable. We're talking about creating a demonstration water harvesting and native plant garden right in front of the office, which is right over here. So when visitors come, they can see that. To limit or ban additions of new turf grass at Fort Tuthill. To work with partners to reline coarse water ponds to prevent leaking, and to continue to implement a sustainable water management plan, which is something we've been doing as an ongoing way to reduce the use of potable water at the park. The next section is dark skies. Of course, Flagstaff is a dark sky city, and we want to adhere to the lighting ordinance. So we kind of talk about the history of that and why it's important to have dark skies in the text. So the goals are to continue to work with lighting enforcement to comply with the ordinance. And then we met with the lighting enforcement officer. He came over here and drove around at night, and he gave us a prioritized list of ways we can improve how things are now. And then, of course, any new lighting installed at the park would adhere to the lighting ordinance as well. And then the last section in this chapter 2 is the scenic and aesthetic values. So that's just when people come in, how do our buildings look, how do our signs look? We want visitors to have an experience where everything looks natural, we use native materials, so we just outline some ways to make that happen here in the goals. I'm gonna get a sip of water. All right, so chapter 3, remember that's 5 chapters. Chapter 3 is on cultural resources. There's a lot of history here at the park, and these are the sections in the cultural resources chapter. We talk about prehistory and early history, so grazing, cattle, sheep ranching, logging, railroads. Then the next section is on the military history, of course, Fort Tuthill. Then we go into the Coconino County ownership at the park, and then we talk a bit about how we manage cultural resources here in the park, and then a little section on unexploded ordnance. So the goals for this chapter are to protect historic resources on the park from damage. No prehistoric resources have been found on the park, so we don't know of any. So this is all pretty much aimed at historic resources. To whenever possible, avoid adverse impacts from projects, and if they can't be avoided, we want to minimize and mitigate the effects, and that goes into the next goal, which is we would adhere to the Arizona Antiquities Act and SHPO recommendations, and we work with them on anything like that that could possibly interfere with cultural resources. And then we want to install interpretive signs on this historic quad right here, explaining the original uses of the building. A lot of the buildings just have a sign like this one just says mess hall, but we thought something more descriptive would be really neat to do. We want to establish a schedule of routine and preventative maintenance on all the historic buildings, many of which are listed on the Register of Historic Places. We want to replace the water and sewer lines around the historic quad, retrofit some historic buildings for year-round use. We want to address official rules and regulations regarding the treatment and use of historic structures and artifacts. And we want to work with the museum here to convert the roofs of the museum buildings to their original diamond-shaped shingles. So that's chapter 3. So we're on to chapter 4, which is a big chapter. Here's an outline. We touch on a lot of topics on this one, so I'll just read them real quick. Recreation, trails, camping, open space, special events, interpretive elements, roads, parking, noise, and drones. And I'll get into each one of these. So first off, the recreation chapter describes, obviously, the park. We have a lot of recreational opportunities here, both for just the individual who wanders in, up to big, really organized events that draw a lot of people. So we described that a little bit, and then our goals are to decide where future restrooms will be located, ensure accessibility, and to resurface the parking lots. Trails, in this section, we describe what the existing trails are, what kind of uses are allowed, and how those trails could connect to the larger region. Goals associated with trails are to draft a complete list of trail rules and regulations and post those, to continue to install and maintain clear signage within the park, add more foot-style trails within Tuthill, connecting ramadas and parking areas, and to continue to monitor trail use, so that we can prioritize maintenance activities and other things like that. So the camping section, we describe where camping is allowed in the park. We have a campground here, but in special circumstances, we do allow camping outside of the campground, so we talk about that as well. So our goals related to camping are to limit camping outside the campground to developed areas, which I'll kind of get into pretty soon here, what developed areas are. To support infrastructure improvements at the current campground right here. To retain forested aspects of the campground, there's a lot of trees in there right now. To continue hazard tree inspection and removal of the campground, obviously you want to be safe over there. And to develop a management plan for non-compliant campers. Okay, so open space, this is what I sort of alluded to. I'm just going to show you this map. Here in the blue stripes are what we are calling open space areas at Fort Tuthill, and the non-striped areas we call developed areas. So open space is the more natural environment, the forested areas. In those areas, we try to have minimal human development, so trails mostly, but also included in the open space are the archery range and the disc golf course. So those count as open space. Then the developed areas are the historic quad, the fairgrounds, parking lots, roads. There's also, counting in there are the snow play, the bike park, the campgrounds. So in this plan, that's a really important demarcation between two areas of the park. And, open space is 62% of the park, so most of the park is open space. The type of activities and developments we're gonna allow at Fort Tuthill is gonna be really different, whether you're in open space or developed areas, so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So, we really wanna protect our open space. We want it to be a place where people can come and experience nature, and we want it to provide good habitat for wildlife. So these are our open space goals. We want to establish a supervisor-approved ordinance to guide enforcement within the park. Create a paid enforcement ranger position at the park. That volunteer thing was meant to be taken out. To retain the park's open space areas to protect the natural environment, vegetation, wildlife, and forest and viewsheds. To restrict active recreation to developed areas of the park. So active recreation is more organized recreation, like a soccer game, the types of activities that need more intensive structures and developments to play or to do. Passive recreation is stuff like hiking and wildlife viewing, where it doesn't need a lot of intensive stuff to be built to do it. So we tend to have active recreation in the developed areas of the park and passive recreation in the open space areas. We want to retain controlled public access for passive recreation in open space areas. We want to develop an environmental education and scientific research partnerships with the park, and ensure open space is retained as buffer zones between roadways and adjacent development. That's something that's going to be more important with increasing development and population growth right here around the park, since we're kind of right on the edge of the city. So special events are a big deal here at Tuthill. In the text, we talk about the different types of events, special events we have at the park, the fact that they attract a lot of visitors and tourism dollars to our area. And we talk about what are and aren't appropriate events to have at Tuthill. And goals related to that are minimizing the number of special events that have exclusive use of the park. That means where an event comes and says, we need to use your entire park and no one else can come in unless they're part of our event. Tied to that, we're saying we want to have certain areas of the park to remain open with sufficient parking during special events when possible. And parking for special events will not be allowed in vegetated areas that could be damaged. There could be, during certain really large special events, they might need extra parking on top of our normally used parking lot, so we don't want them to just park wherever and be crushing vegetation. So interpretive elements, this is a cool topic. We have a lot of really interesting natural and cultural history here at Fort Tuthill, and we want to share that with our visitors so they can learn about it. We really only have one existing interpretive element, big sign right now, which is about Ponderosa Pine Forest Health, and that's over sort of by the horse areas. But we're definitely interested in having more. So our goals related to interpretive elements are to research funding opportunities to add additional signage about natural or cultural stuff, including signs here around the quad that I mentioned. And the second goal is to develop interpretive resources that highlight the park's unique and important natural environment aspects and natural and cultural history. So for roads, the text we just described what the existing conditions are, roads and entrances for vehicular traffic that we have now. And our goals related to roads are to manage vehicular access with clearly marked roads and trails and access information, to retain internal circulation of roads in the park and restrict roads that provide through travel. We don't want to have a road that people just travel through to get somewhere else where they just are driving through the park. We just want them to come into the park. We want to manage parking on roadways during periods of heavy use to maintain access for emergency vehicles. Continue to minimize road surface areas in the park, and to use the least environmentally impactful options for snow removal on roads. And kind of related to that is parking. So during normal times, we only allow parking at established parking lots. And like I mentioned, during special circumstances, we can have parking in other areas. And we want to not allow overnight parking. So our goal related to parking is to have a sign stating that there is no overnight parking and that violators will be towed. Next is noise. If people are coming to Tuthill to experience nature and the natural environment, we want it to be quiet. So to that end, we have these goals. We want to attend planning and zoning meetings that could affect the visitor's experience here at the park. In this case, particularly about their experience of nature and the natural environment here. And to ensure that future developments are informed at special uses of Fort Tuthill. We also make noise. So we have big loud events here occasionally, and so for example with the hospital, we just want to let them know, if they have patients in there, that we do have concerts and the county fair here. So it's a two-way street. And then we just touch on drones a bit. A lot of natural areas have banned drones, so our goal is to address drone use with a park rule. So that was chapter 4, that was a big one. We're on to our last chapter, chapter 5, don't worry, it's short. We really only talk about these two topics. Looking into the future, we thought the biggest things that we'd have to be concerned with as a department here at Tuthill are the increasing development around Fort Tuthill, which I've touched on a bit, and then of course climate change. So there's a lot of potential for increasing development around the park. To the west and south is national forest land, so that's probably not going to get developed anytime soon. Meeting us at the corner is state land, so that could be developed sometime. And then to the east is the interstate, so that's already there, but there is some land between the interstate and the park that is privately owned. And then to the north is all privately owned. So there's some individual homeowners, but the bulk of it to the north and the east is Northern Arizona Healthcare, and they are putting in that really large hospital research recuperation campus, which you may have heard about. And then just with increasing population growth forecasted in Flagstaff, we're just probably gonna see a lot more visitors, and it could change the nature of the park as far as just, the amount of visitorship we get could be more crowded. So we kind of talk about that in the text, and the goals we have related to that are to maintain open space buffers around the park to mitigate the effects from nearby development. So, for example, with the hospital complex, a comment we submitted on their proposal is that they do have some kind of vegetated buffer on their side of the border, and then we will also do that as well. So just working with people who are looking at developing near the park. And then also in collaboration with adjacent developers, we want to manage access into the park with well thought out and well placed trails and other entrances, to avoid social trails and just people coming in and wherever and trampling vegetation, things like that. And then, we want to, of course, maintain existing park boundaries. So we don't want the park to shrink. And then we also, we're looking into the future here. We might want to just keep in mind that someday we might have to explore the idea of whether Fort Tuthill has a carrying capacity, or if we might need to limit visitorship somehow in the future. So climate change is something that is addressed in the Coconino Comprehensive Plan. It's something that we recognize as being an important thing we need to keep in mind. So we definitely, Coconino Parks and Rec will be weighing climate concerns with management decisions, particularly in open areas. So some ideas we've had for that is to only use native and drought-tolerant plant species in landscaping and hydro seeding, so we don't have to irrigate. Install educational signage about climate change. Discourage single-use plastics from being sold at a lot of the events we have here. To work with providers to implement a recycling program at Fort Tuthill. Right now we don't have pickup at the park. We want to encourage vendors and concessionaires to utilize recycled materials for food and drinks, et cetera, when that's feasible. And that is the plan. So that I've just gone through all the goals in the plan for you guys. Thank you for listening. And the reason we're doing this is because we want your thoughts and comments. So if anyone has any right now, we'd love to hear them.
And if people on the teams, if they want to either write a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that, or unmute yourself, and please feel free to ask that now. So thank you, Jessica. That was really informative. As people are maybe preparing their questions, I'll also say that we do have a website that we can pull a link up and share that with people, but it's been in the materials online. We're really encouraging people to provide comments within the draft document. Please read it. I know Jessica's presentation was really good and thorough in going over the chapters. On the whole, the plan is not that long. I think it's really informative and really interesting. But you can go right into the PDF online and make comments in the specific section that you may have a question or comment about. And that is due by December 4th.
Yeah, and then we're having a second open house. It will again be in person here at the Mess Hall and hybrid virtual Thursday night at 5:30. All right.
Questions from anybody in the room here?
I guess this is Carlton with Fort Tuthill. The only comment that I would have, just as an in-holder inside the county park, is just trying to line up with regards to your goals with forest health and invasive weeds and lots of that. So Air Force Environmental manages that for us. And so obviously, like, if we're managing different invasives than you guys are managing, like, we might have conflicting goals there. And so it seems like trying to line that up and have communication between those two would be helpful so that we all, move together. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jeffrey Gross and I should probably be in touch with them.
Yeah, I can get you the point of contact for
Great.
that. So like they do invasive weed treatment, and it's wacky though, because it's someone in Phoenix, but then Colorado State University manages forestry and a lot of invasive weed for just about the entire military, and so they're really good at what they do. They're definitely so they can speak the language a lot better than I can on particular goals there.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine we'd conflict too much. Less of any weeds is better, but yeah, we absolutely should be in contact with each other. That's a really good point.
Good comment, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess the question I have, and maybe it's getting too far ahead of ourselves on this, but has there been any talk about reaching out to any, like, I guess, groups or consultants or experts on, like, specific areas as far as, like, traffic flow or anything like that? I know you did have it in there as far as, like, the dark sky and everything like that, and you have the light enforcement officer, but any other aspects that we're looking to improve? Like, has there been any talk about reaching out to any, like, consultants or anything like that, or?
Cynthia, do you know, I know we submitted a lot of comments in regards to the healthcare facility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have talked to, actually has, speaking of traffic, a traffic engineer, consultant, and they've looked at it from the perspective of Northern Arizona Health coming in. The county does, in terms of traffic specifically. We also have, traffic engineers on staff through our Public Works Department. But the utilization of consultants and experts in certain fields, we don't necessarily, we're not saying that we won't use them. Once we tackle a goal,
Sure.
and if it makes sense to bring in a consultant, we'd have to build that into a budget.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're certainly not opposed to that. We're certainly not in a position to feel like, we have the best and latest and greatest information on any one topic. So we would certainly be open to the utilization of consultants as we tackle certain goals where we feel that their expertise would be of value.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, hi. This is James Denton with the Fort Tuthill Military Museum. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions regarding, I got it in the meeting probably about 10 minutes late, sorry about that. But I caught the tail end of talking about Fort Tuthill, the quad itself, the historic quad. And one of the things that we've talked about, we have several concerns, but we'll talk about those in a minute. But one of the things would be is, are there any thoughts of, as far as when you start talking about bringing back the historic Fort Tuthill quad the way that it was, one of those things would be the officers' wives' quarters that's off of the quad itself, and also the one by the Navajo Ramada, which would have been the officers' latrine and bathhouse. Have you guys talked about what your thoughts are with that, to include the use of the regimental headquarters for another potential building as part of a museum?
I don't think we were talking about restoring any of the buildings to the way they were. I think we were just talking about maintaining them just so they stay in good shape. And then we did talk about restoring the roofs, the shingles. But
yes.
Other than that, I think we're just talking about restoring. And then we talked about maybe retrofitting some for year-round use.
Okay, and then what about signage for those buildings? We get a lot of questions asked at the museum. We're not looking for a restoration project, but we're looking for, when you're talking about signage throughout Fort Tuthill, those would be some of the buildings that I think would be relevant to people visiting Fort Tuthill as they walk around the quad and also the grounds of Fort Tuthill, like the officers' wives building, which is a rock house just to the east of the quad. That's what we would be looking for. We would be looking for just a way to, as an enhancement, it actually kind of enhances the museum experience by being able to walk around the grounds and see what some of those buildings were used for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could have a walking tour. Yeah, well, we did talk about, one of our goals is to have interpretive signs for, we said the buildings on the quad, but you're right, there are some outlying buildings we could consider as well.
And the shooting range.
Correct. Yeah, I think there's also some old bunkers that were made some training bunkers that are made throughout the grounds. We get questions about that as well, which are just some rock, lava rock, bunkers that soldiers trained in. Yeah, I'm just saying, just trying to think of a way that, as far as a walking tour goes, would be a way that we could have a map and historic buildings that people could actually see, which would enhance the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a really great thing for people to be able to do here. And I can add language that it could be not just the buildings on the quad, but outlying buildings and structures as well. That's a great point.
Thank you. And also, I guess the final thing from us would be is, I don't know if there's a plan, or what is the plan to help restore some of the windows we have several windows that are decaying pretty significantly, and I just want to make sure that we have a plan moving forward on how to get those replaced or sealed or repaired.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was not aware of that, but we can discuss that with the group.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, James.
Anyone else? Well, thank you everyone for attending. Remember to go to the Conveo site if anything else pops up in your mind, and we will take a look at it. Appreciate your interest.
Yep, thank you. This is Cynthia. Just want to thank everyone for being here and taking time out of your day. Jessica's done a lot of great work, as you can see, on this land management plan. We're almost at the finish line. So, yeah, any additional thoughts that may come, or any thoughts that may come to you, or additional thoughts that may come to you between now and December 4th, you could write them to Jessica directly. But we really like the Conveo program. The actual draft plan is in this Conveo application, and you can write your comments right into it. If you see a comment and you agree with it, all you can just say agree, and not to be repetitive. But anyway, there are many forms that you can still let us know what thoughts you might have, or concerns, or whatever questions, or whatever the case may be. This is the time to share those with us. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
All right.